So this is kind of a presentation that I do to prospective clients. And I thought, well, you know what, I can kind of pick and pull what makes sense to kind of educate you guys on. I know that you guys are familiar with franchises. I know that you probably have a surface area idea of what it is that I do with my clients, but I'd like to dig into that a little bit deeper. I'm also really big on interaction, so please just blurt out, interrupt me, chat, whatever, ask questions along the way. This isn't a formal presentation. I'm just here to kind of educate you on the landscape that I've seen within the franchising world, how I work with my clients, and what that kind of looks like overall. So generally, what I do is help people find the right franchise. A little background on me. I am a franchise consultant. It's kind of easy to think of me like a franchise broker. I know Brian's a business broker. I'm not a business broker at this point in time, but it's easy to understand it that way. But I like to think of myself more like a franchise matchmaker, where I truly am helping people to find the right franchise. But background on me, you see the picture here of my husband and my kids. I'm big family person. We do like to travel. We do like to go out in our boat. And at one point in time, I was in the corporate world, and that's right out of college, I went straight into the corporate world and was doing the grind for quite a while. And I myself got super burnt out on doing that. I was the typical corporate burnout where I was tired of traveling. I was an executive for a med spa in the marketing world. And I just was tired of traveling. I was tired of, being at somebody else's beck and call, not being able to take my kids to their little Halloween parades during the day at their school. So I myself was once in a position where I no longer wanted to do what I was doing and instead own my own business and really kind of have control of myself. So I did end up escaping the corporate world, found a franchise through a franchise consultant, in fact, my predecessor. And now I would never look back. But so I am also, FranNet is a franchise. So I am also a franchise owner. So I'm the franchise owner of a franchise that helps people find franchises, if you can retain all that. And I'm also a rare Florida native. I don't know, I can see some of you on my screen, but I don't know how many of you guys are originally from Florida, but both my husband and I both are originally from Florida. So I'm actually pretty proud of that. I went to USF, so I've been in and around the Tampa Bay area for quite a while now. And as I mentioned, wife, mom, outdoor enthusiast. So that's a little bit about me. How many of you are familiar with FranNet? Any hands out there? People who I know Dino is. I know you've worked with some of not only my clients, but you also worked with Pat, who was my predecessor. But just to give a little context, FranNet is it's almost 35 years old, actually. International franchise consulting firm. We, like I said, match people who are looking to go into business, matching entrepreneurs, as we like to say, to find the right franchise. We help educate people on what the opportunities are that are out there. We work with them to identify and document their goals, personally, professionally, financially, short-term, long-term. All of those should be different. And if people haven't, if they're thinking about owning a business, those are really important things to think about. And a lot of people haven't. So we work with them to understand that. That then informs us on presenting them different options that they can make informed decisions on. So, most people, when they think of a franchise, what do they think of? McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Dunkin' Donuts, right? There's a lot of different other franchises out there. So my goal is always to educate people on what the opportunities are out there that they probably wouldn't have even thought of as an opportunity for themselves. So we offer them choices. Just so you know, FranNet, we don't work with every single franchise. There are over 4,000 different franchises out there. Some are awesome, some are not so awesome. So we do our due diligence on the franchises that we bring into our network. We work with about 300. Even though there's 4,000 out there, we work with about 300 at any given time. And in order to qualify to be within our network, we a couple of things. One, we don't even bother working with fast food chains, casual dining, hotels, gas stations, anything fringe, you know, in the CBD or marijuana space. It's just a little bit too, you know, from a regulatory standpoint, we're not sure where that's always going to go. But most of my clients are going to be people who are either rolling out of the corporate world, maybe gonna, you know, own something for themselves for the first time, or creating a sideline business. They're not interested in owning 24 Hardys. So it doesn't, you know, make any sense for us to align ourselves with the fast food chains or the big casual dining chains of the world. And then we vet every single franchise that we do work with. And what do I mean by that is we talk to the franchise organizations. We talk to their leadership. We look at their growth strategy. We look at their franchise disclosure documents. And if you're not familiar with what a franchise disclosure document, I have a little information on that as well, that I'll cover. And then we also talk to existing franchise owners, which is called validation. We want to understand from these franchise owners who are living and breathing it. Hey, how do you feel about your franchise organization? Do you feel like they have the right structure in order to, do you feel like you're being supported? So we actually turn more franchises away every single year than we bring into our system. So we're pretty picky about that. And just, to be clear, I do not sell franchises. I am a middleman. So my clients are people who are looking to go into business. I don't work for those franchise organizations, although that is how I make my money, much like a, executive, headhunter or a realtor. If I help my client find a franchise, then that franchise has agreed to pay a referral fee. So that's another criteria for being within our network. They have to agree to pay a referral fee. Michael, I see you have a question.
Yes, and I'm looking at this, and a couple of my questions are clearly you're doing a lot of due diligence as you're trying to figure out what could be a good fit. And I'm hoping at some point you're going to tell us a little bit about the deep dive you take with people who come to you who are trying to go through this process. And I'm really interested in kind of the emotional psychology piece, and also what's the vetting you're doing in terms of their business skills. Because as we know, one of the things that a franchise can do is help put a roadmap out to help a person through a successful entrepreneur journey. But at the same time, everyone who shows up is not necessarily ready. And so I'm hoping you're going to touch on that at some point of this.
Yep, I absolutely am. Yep, because I do take my clients through a series of steps in order to help them uncover what opportunities are out there. So for anyone that does come to me and they're just like, oh, what are the hottest trends? What are the biggest franchises? Which can I make the most money with? To be honest, I don't really work with people who want that, who are looking for that quick fix information, because there's no quick answer to that. So I definitely take my clients through a process. I am going to walk through that here in a second. But little background, Brian is here today. We all know there's only 3 ways to get into business. You can start a business from scratch. I know a lot of you guys have, so kudos to you. You can buy an existing business working with someone like Brian, who, a business is up and running and hopefully already cash flowing positive and is a positive business. Or you can invest in a franchise. So really only the 3 ways. There's pros and cons to all of them. But I will tell you that, even though Michael kind of preluded earlier that this year has been interesting for me from a franchise broker standpoint, because so many people are keeping their jobs. And so starting a franchise, they're looking for something on the side. But that being said, in 2021, we saw the biggest rise, 5 million business startups were registered, which was the highest of all time. So a lot of people are looking to get out there and own their own business in one of those three ways, right? Like whether it was to start their own, buy a business, or invest in a franchise. So there's a lot of demand for people doing that right now. And you guys know what a franchise is. I don't need to educate you there, but just think of it as, it's a license to use, the trademark, the systems, the structure in exchange for money. There's that initial franchise fee and some royalties that go along with that. And again, I mentioned franchises are not for everyone. There are pros and cons to investing in a franchise, just like there is, buying an existing business and or starting your own. And I always like to run my clients through these pros and cons because they need to understand that it's not a fit for everyone. I very oftentimes am working with people to help them understand that this might not be a good fit for you. It might be a better fit to work with someone like Brian in order to find a business that's already cash flowing, that already has employees, that that they don't have to figure out and grow, find real estate for. So there's always pros and cons. I will highlight a few advantages, disadvantages specifically of a franchise. Obviously there's that name recognition, but with a franchise you do get training and support. There's a support system behind you, right? They have what I've heard a lot of franchisors say this before. We've made all the mistakes that you don't have to make when we started this business. So they figured out how to bring in different systems and structure. So it's that proven business system to get started and to continue to operate. There's marketing experience that they have, purchasing power that they have, financing options can be not saying they are, but there are some finance. They can be a little bit easier than if you were to do a startup that's not a franchise. So there's some financing options out there. Janet and Mark are probably more familiar and understand that a little bit better. And then there's also a franchise disclosure document that if you were to buy an existing business, you're not going to get a franchise disclosure document. So I educate my clients on what to expect with a franchise disclosure document. It's chock full of all information behind, the scenes, the inner workings of the franchise. And then the best part about being a part of a franchise is you do become part of a family. We have that corporate, the corporate support system that's there for you, but you also have your fellow franchisees to be a support system. And there is naturally a lower failure rate with franchises that have been proven. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Franchises have a vested interest in you performing well because that's how they make their money is through royalties. So they have naturally a lower failure rate than a natural startup. But truly there are disadvantages. It is not for everyone. And those are the things I try and help people kind of understand. Is this not for you? Just as much as it is for you, is it not for you? If they're really uncomfortable with the money part of giving money to another organization with that initial franchise fee, and then those ongoing royalties that they would have to pay, it's probably not going to ever sit well with them if that's something they're uncomfortable with. There are not as many options in the franchise world as there are in, just the general world of business startups. There are territory restrictions with franchises. You cannot just put your business wherever you feel like it. They do have specific areas that they've either already earmarked for, where a viable based on demographics, territory is, and you have to stay within those territory restrictions when you sign those franchise agreements. There are the rules and restrictions. You can only sell their products. They do have structured operating systems. So let's use, for instance, their POS system or their CRM system. If you hate it, if you don't like to use it, if you think it's a piece of junk, you don't have a choice. You have to use it. So they do have those structured operating systems that sometimes people don't like. And then I put on here little initial cash flow. And the reason I did that is because franchises will hold your feet to the fire to make sure that you've set up your business for success for the future. So they're going to force you to spend marketing dollars and to have a grand opening you're investing. So it's going to take a little bit longer for you to cash flow positive because they want you to invest in the business up front in order to see success, larger success for the future. So you guys all, this isn't probably any news, but I do like to focus on the pros and cons. Hey, Michael.
Yeah, you've just said something here that I think is really, really important. And I both Dino and Brian know this as well as you do, as they worked with this. And of course, Cindy is very familiar with this. One of the things here is that the process procedures of the blueprint of what it takes to get from where you are to where you're going is laid out for you. And I know that one of the things that all of us who work with business owners see is that they tend to make decisions on the fly based on whatever's happening with them. And human nature is to deviate from that roadmap. And so I think that's an important component here. And while it may be feel like a shackle to some business owners, I think it's important to point that out. It's one of the things that if we were to go back and do an autopsy on businesses that have not been successful, these are some of the things that make the difference. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the comments. So overall, a franchise is all about their business systems. It's not about having the best service and product, by the way, right? Like think of McDonald's. I can make a much better cheeseburger than McDonald's can, but it's consistency. They have the process down right. Their marketing, sales, operations, technology, accounting. You're buying into a system. You're not buying into, the best product and service out there. You're buying into a system that has already been proven. I already mentioned there's lots of different franchises. I don't need to cover a ton of this here, but it's not just franchise and donuts, as I mentioned on the last page. There's a lot of other different franchise opportunities out there, which is why working with a franchise consultant like me and the process that I take my clients through is so important. Many times I get people who they want a restaurant, but should they really own a restaurant? And that's mainly because that's all they think of when they think of a franchise. But there's everything from, home services, home improvement, home repair. I think, even like HVAC services, plumbing services, there's franchises for all of those. Pets, kids, senior citizens, franchises for every service or product that they have to offer. Automotive, B2B franchises. So whether it's, business coaching or IT services, marketing services. Think of the beauty industry. There's lots of franchises that are within that category. All the hair cutteries that are out there. And now it's ever popular for beauty is now no longer something that women do like behind a closed door. We're very open about it, right? We'll go get lashes and we don't, or brows or whatever it might be. So beauty is a big space in the franchise world. So lots and lots of different types of franchises out there, which is why it's important to find the right one. Not every franchise is for every person, and not every person is for every franchise. And that's why, the process that I take my clients through, which is about a 6-step process to understand what, are they going to make a good candidate for a franchise and what opportunities are out there. So I'll quickly kind of run through, these steps. First step being are they just, I'm going to, just in an introductory phone call, I can tell immediately whether they're even, a viable candidate at all. So if, for instance, are they able and willing to follow a system? If they're a true Buccaneer, I mentioned it before, if they're not going to want to follow a system, if they want to do their own things, or they have these ideas on, I had a gentleman that came to me the other day and he's like, well, I want to start a business over off of State Road 54 and like the Land O'Lakes area because there's a lot of traffic that's going on there. Well, that's the last thing you need to, let's talk about what kind of business. I mean, I get where your head is coming from, but let's talk about what kind of business makes sense for you before we start to talk about the exact location that it needs to be. But, are they going to be willing to follow a system? Because with franchises do come systems. So I try and kind of talk through how did they feel about that, and running through a system. You got to talk about money. If you're going to invest in a business, it is not something that you get for free. There are not really grants out there. I get that a lot, well, what kind of grants can I get? There are some out there, but they're not very easy to get. So, what kind of capital and funding? Have they thought through that? Have they talked to a bank, or have they talked to some sort of lender? Have they talked to their friends and family about what this looks like? So what kind of, capital funding are they, have they even thought about that? And sometimes I have to just kind of, level set with people about, about the expenses that go into a business startup. And that can, immediately rule them up, but it's all about timing. So, sometimes just me being able to educate them on what it might take. It might be timing, might be 3 years down the road. They're not ready now, they might be ready later. So we do talk about timing. Not only are they ready for it now, but also when they're thinking of starting a business, when is that? Are they out of a job and they need to start something, in the next 3 weeks? Well, that's probably not going to happen. It's not very realistic, especially if it's going to be anything with a brick and mortar space. Remember, most of the franchises I work with are going to be startup. You're going to, just the real estate process alone, it might take you a year before you get a business up and running. So, we're going to talk about timing. When are they going to be mentally ready to make a decision? And when do they need to make money? We're going to talk about their support system. Is their spouse on board? I get that a lot. I get, whether I'm working with, a husband or a wife, and they're like, oh, well, I haven't really told them yet that I'm considering doing this. That's always kind of a red flag to me that, they need to have spousal support or family support around them that's going to understand this. And then just simply have realistic expectations. If they think that they're going to make, anyone that comes to me and goes, well, I'm going to need, I want to make, $250,000 by end of year one. I'd love to see that too. And if you can find it, please let me know what that is. Because, it takes time to build a business. So I also talk to them about, what are your expectations? If you're going to quit your job, do you have enough funds in your, to support your lifestyle while you're building a business, because building a business takes some time. So talking about kind of realistic expectations. So immediately, just on a first conversation, I can kind of determine whether they're a candidate and or give them advice on, what kind of timing there could be. One of the things, the next step in the process, and this is specific to BrandNet, is we do have all of our clients take what's called an entrepreneurial profile. We used to call it a franchise assessment, and then we realized, wait a minute, this is not just specific to franchises. This type of assessment is really appropriate for anyone who is looking to start a business or buy a business or start a franchise. So we actually renamed it to be more of an entrepreneurial profile. It is a proprietary profiling tool that establishes individuals' values, motives, core competencies, strengths in business. So it isn't, it's much like if anyone's ever done DISC, Myers-Briggs. I know a lot of you on this have, or you might even, work with people on those. It's similar nature to that, but it does profile a little bit differently. But it isn't going to spit out with, oh, here's the perfect franchises for Dino. It's not, it doesn't work like that. It's going to hone in on how are they, motivated, what motivates them, what value systems drive them, their core competencies, their leadership style, their work style, their communication style. So it creates a good baseline for me to work with them and for me to communicate with them better. Hey, Michael.
Yeah, you had mentioned this, and I'm intrigued by this, and I think it's interesting that, a differentiator between the way you run your practice and others who say that they're doing similar work to you is this particular tool. Now, is there a way, if someone was interested, even though they may not want a franchise, if they were kind of curious about how this particular profile worked or wanted to learn more about themselves and maybe get an unvarnished view from another perspective on their ability to be a franchisee, how would they go about that?
Yeah, and not only just the ability to be a franchisee, but they're kind of their entrepreneur, like I said, assessment. So in general, kind of what makes them tick. And so the answer is this is a free assessment that I offer to everyone. So I also earlier on, I'm not sure if you noticed it, but I do some things with SCORE and with the SBDC, and they very oftentimes are working with their candidates on different, and they kind of want a little bit of an assessment behind them. So I offer it to them to use with their clients as well. So, and I open this up for any of you, if you're just curious about, how you guys would profile out individually, or if you ever are working with people and there can, you think that this might be a useful tool, anyone, I can always say, it's just a link that I send out. I get the results and then I can send them out. And I'm always open to sitting down and talking through the readout as well. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I like to highlight the things that that I look for within the assessment. So that's the first step or the second step really, that I have my clients go through. But then really the big part of it, and Michael, this is what you were talking about earlier, is how do I kind of get in and understand, what opportunities make sense for them, where, are they even a candidate, is the next process go through what's called building a business model. And what that means is I'm going to, sit down with my clients to really understand what is driving them. Where do they want to be in a year versus 5, 10, or 20 years? Those are different milestones, right? Your life looks different in those timeframes. So we're going to talk about what their goals are over time. What does retirement look like? Sometimes I talk to people, and when I ask them, I'm like, hey, what is your retirement plan? They're like, Jenny, I haven't even started a business yet. Why in the heck are you talking to me about retiring? And I said, well, at some point, most people do retire and it looks differently for everyone. Are you planning on retiring and sailing away on a boat, on a sailboat somewhere, drinking a margarita, and you want nothing to do with everything else? Or do you always see yourself working in some capacity, whether it's behind the scenes, once a week, whatever that might be? So we're going to talk about those things because different businesses can offer those different things. Not every business is going to be able to accomplish what your retirement goals look like. So we really talk about that. Financial, lifestyle goals. Things like, their must-haves. What do they want their work-life balance to look like? So that was it for me, right? When I told you guys earlier, I was in the corporate world. I was pretty stressed out. I needed to change things up so that I had more flexibility in my lifestyle to spend more time with my kids and my husband, not have to travel as much, be able to kind of create my own day. So when I was going through this process, that was my number one driver. For some people, that isn't as high on their priority list for them. Some people are just looking for, they want to keep their current job. They like what they're doing. They're trying to create an additional revenue stream. And I am going to talk a little bit about that later, because that's what a lot of people are doing these days. Or are they looking to exit from their current job and they want to replace, at some point in time, they want to replace their income? Or are they looking for this to be kind of a bolt-on business? Maybe they already own a business and they're looking for something that is really going to, just either accentuate it in some way or complement it in some way. Are they looking for scalability, growth? What do they need to make money wise? What is their budget? How much, investment level are they willing to put in? Not everyone has unlimited funds. And so, there should be a budget centered around it. Hey, Michael.
Hey, I'm looking at this and I'm kind of fascinated by it, because I think it's an important conversation you're having with people. And of course, Oscar and I have similar conversations with people, but from a different perspective. We're looking at total portfolio value, and we're thinking about their minimum income and what the maximum income they may get from that. Is there a rule of thumb or some scale that you kind of work with or walk people through? If they need $200,000 of the 250 that you mentioned, they need to put $1 million aside or $5 million aside. Is there some number that you kind of work with, or some metric? I think that would be an interesting component of this. And are people surprised when they look at what the income is and what the actual commitment is to generate that?
Yeah. So there isn't a magic number. I will tell you that, because franchises do come in all shapes and sizes and all investment levels, and the opportunity on the other end is all, is very different from others too. And I will, another thing, a point to really point out is it could be a really high investment level business opportunity. It doesn't always mean that means high returns. So, so that's what I'm always kind of talking to people, and why we have to talk about, what do they want their income to look like at what point in time, and, what is their investment level opportunity. So on top of all of that, and I actually will, Michael, by the way, I'm going to get into kind of investment levels for franchises and, kind of where they sit. And sometimes it is a little surprising to people, and sometimes it's absolutely not. So every person is different too. Oh, whoops. All right. So part of the building the business model process is really digging deep into not only, those goals, but also different facets of business. What types of customers are they looking for? Do they want B2B, B2C? Do they want to sell a product, a service? What do they see themselves doing? Are they, what is their growth strategy? Are they looking to build an empire, or do they just want one single something that they can, kind of tinker with and, or make an additional revenue stream? Or are they looking to be, like I said, that empire builder? They want multiple units, and they want to maybe, across the Tampa Bay area or across the country, whatever that might look like. How many hours are they willing to dedicate to this business? Are they looking to jump ship and go into it full time? Or are they looking for an additional revenue stream, what we call semi-passive franchises? I never like to say anything can be passive, especially when it's a startup, right? So, are they looking for more that kind of semi-absentee opportunity? How many hours a week can they dedicate? How much flexibility do they have in their day? What support, who else is going to be involved in the business? What type of business environment is appealing to them? Some people do not want to work from home. Other people, that's all they want to do is work from home. So we really kind of dig into that, and, where do they see themselves operating from? What if it's an industrial space? Are they comfortable with that? What if it is in an office park? Are they comfortable with that? So we really kind of talk through, what do they want their environment to look like? And then we'll talk through the franchise things too. Things like, there are franchises that have been out there forever and a decade. And then there's franchises who are new kids on the block. What tolerance do they have for a franchise that's been around for a while versus ones that have, are maybe good, you're going to need to be kind of an early adapter. And there's pros and cons, and then there's franchises everywhere in between, and there's pros and cons to all of them. You know, those that have been around for a long time, obviously they're true and tried, and they've been able to be successful over time, and there's a reason for that. But there can be something exciting about being part of something that's new, something that you can grasp onto and have multiple units of, something that you can help, you know, kind of create. So we talk through a lot of things like that. And then I have employees on the top here because it is amazing to me how many times people have not thought of what their employees either should look like or how many that they have a tolerance for. So, you know, we do talk about, you know, how many people are you comfortable managing? What kinds of employees, what skill sets, you know, do you know, prefer that they have, blue collar, white collar, skill sets, whatever that might look like. I always use the example of, you know, whenever people do come to me to, you know, they're considering restaurants, right? Like they love restaurants, they love food, they think it's fun. They've always dreamed of owning their own restaurant. That's just been their dream and their passion, right? But then when I ask them how many employees they want to manage, they're like, well, I don't really want a lot of drama. I don't really want a lot of turnover. I don't want a lot of employees. And I'm like, who's going to run your restaurant? You cannot be there, you know, 7 days a week, and, you know, at all hours of the week. They're a restaurant, naturally, you're gonna have a lot of employees. So they have to think through those types of things that most people haven't. So those are a lot of the things that we dig into. Michael, did that kind of answer your question that you had asked earlier on kind of really digging in and making sure that people kind of understand? Okay. So again, the reasons that I have people go through the process of building that business model and I work with them on it is because franchisers are just not all the same. Like I said before, they come in all shapes and sizes. There's some that are high investment level and those that are on the lower end from an investment level standpoint. There's some that are very structured systems, like McDonald's, right? Like you can't just go buy napkins at Publix if you run out. Like you have to use the napkins that McDonald's supplies. And then there's very flexible systems where they're open-minded to maybe having, you know, localized products or whatever it might be. So if somebody needs a very structured system, then we're going to look at structured types of franchise organizations. If they want something that they can put a little bit of their own stamp on, we're going to look at systems that are a little bit more flexible. That I mentioned before, there are franchises that have been around forever, and then there's the new kids on the block. There's a tolerance. Not everyone has a tolerance for the new kids on the block. And then actually, I've been finding more so lately, most people, they don't want something that's been around forever. They want something kind of new and exciting and something they can, you know, kind of maybe make their own. Many units versus fewer units. The reason I put that on here is because some people haven't even thought about, in order to meet their income goals, maybe one single unit isn't going to do the trick. So think of the hair cutteries of the world, right? Like the super clips, sports clips, great clips, all the clips that are out there. Those are all franchises. A single unit of one of those probably isn't going to replace your corporate income. So you're looking at multi-units when it comes to that type of franchise. So if you don't have an appetite to have multiple units or multiple territories, we're going to need to look at things that in a single unit structure could accomplish your goals. Expensive versus inexpensive, quick ramp up time versus slow ramp up time. For instance, service businesses. If it doesn't require brick and mortar space, it's going to be able to ramp up a lot quicker than if it does. If it requires a brick and mortar space, a lot more, there's a lot more things involved in getting that business up and running. So if they're on a time crunch and they want to start, a business sooner rather than later, it's going to be harder to do a business startup franchise if it requires brick and mortar space. And then also considering who do they want to be in the business? Are they more the owner operator type? Do they want to be more of an owner executive? Or are they truly looking for that semi-absentee opportunity? Because not all franchises can get them where they need to be, either at entry or even at endpoint. So we really talk through who do you want to be in the business and at what point in time do you want to be there? So if you're good jumping all in and you're willing to do that for the first 3 years, but eventually your goal is to pull away from the business, there's some franchises where you could do that and there's some where you can't. So we talk through a lot of that information. So one of the things that I put out there to this group is, and I mentioned to Michael during our lunch, is that so many people right now are gainfully employed and they are they're not really ready to quit their jobs. And that hasn't always been the case. In fact, in past years, so many of my clients were in what we call transition, right? They maybe had been downsized from their corporate career, or they downsized themselves because they were burnouts, just like me. So they were looking to completely do something different. Today in the landscape, and maybe this might be changing, right? We're seeing little cues, but today in this landscape and for this year, so many people have been looking for businesses that they can do as sideline jobs. So I wanted to point out some of the industries that are most popular as semi-absentee opportunities. So the number one being that I've seen out there is in the fitness space. So if you think of, you're probably familiar with Cycle Bar, Club Pilates, Pure Barre, Row House, the boutique fitness, right? So anything with, yoga, Pilates, martial arts, there's a lot of boutique fitness out there. Those have been very popular as a means to create a second stream of income for people, because as the owner of that type of business, you're not teaching yoga. you're hiring a manager to manage, the schedule and everything like that. So that's been probably the number one industry that I've seen for semi-absentee opportunities. The second one that I've seen a lot of growth in recently have been businesses for pets. Pets have never been more popular. I think I've told this story, so I know some of you have heard this a million times, but you can, if you go into Home Depot these days, you see at least 3 dogs in a shopping cart, right? Like there's always, people are taking their pets everywhere with them. Pets, I just read something the other day that pets are the new, what is it? Plants are the new pets are the new kids. So I don't know how true that is, but I thought it was kind of funny because people will do anything for their pets. And so we've been seeing a lot of pet lovers that are jumping into businesses that can have the opportunity to be semi-absentee, again, hiring the right kind of general manager, things like doggy daycare, boarding, grooming, pet walking, waste removal. That's a big one. Duty Calls is actually a franchise for pet waste removal. The number 3 category I'm seeing for semi-absentee opportunities are anything with kids. So a lot of supplemental education, after school programs, daycare. So think of things like tutoring or coding, like I said, supplemental education, arts for kids, things like that. The kids space, again, is still just as popular as if not more so. People will do everything for their kids. Those have also been ones that I've seen that people are gravitating towards for a semi-absentee opportunity. Number 4, beauty and wellness. So in that space, it's inclusive of, like I said, all the kind of hair cutteries, spas, massage, lashes, brows, facials, nails. Those are pretty common in the semi-absentee opportunity space. As again, sideline businesses. And then the 5th one, which could be surprising to some people, is services. So there are a lot of franchises that have built business models that can be semi-absentee. Again, what makes up a semi-absentee business? Hiring the right people that can be there to do the job when you're not there full time. So even in a service industry, it can be done. So a lot of franchise models are creating a service industry that can be semi-absentee, where you hire a general manager, sales manager, director right off the bat. And they're getting trained right off the bat. So everything from home improvement, B2B services, automotive, there's been some that a lot of franchises are building that, kind of semi-absentee opportunity there. But again, all manager run, requires more overhead for semi-absentee opportunities. Any questions about semi-absentee industries or opportunities that are out there? Okay. Michael, you asked about investment level, right? So here's a chart. It is a little bit dated from 2019. I need to get some new data, but I'll tell you, it hasn't changed too terribly much. There definitely are those franchises that are the $1 million+ franchises, right? The over $500,000 investment level franchises. And then there's some that are under 50,000, so the lower level investment franchises. I will tell you that the majority of my clients that I work with, their investment level is somewhere between 150 to 350,000. Now, let me talk to you about what that means a little bit, because people are like, what? Why do I have to spend that on a startup, right? And it's because the initial investment range is inclusive of that initial franchise fee. It's what you pay to the franchise organization, as well as all costs it's going to take to get that business up, running, and operational. So an example, this is, kind of budget hair care, right? Like I talked about the clips of the world. So you do have that initial franchise fee, depending on how many units you have or how big your territory is, that can range. So, there's a range there, but then almost all of the rest is what it's going to take you're going to need to, rent and security deposit, tenant improvements, equipment, your point of sale and technology, your inventory, your training, everything that goes in to investing in a business. Plus, they bake in 3 months working capital. So in some cases, a lot of franchises bake in 6 months working capital. And then you always plan for some miscellaneous expenses, right? But this is an example of, if you see an investment level for a franchise and you're like, wow, why is that so expensive? People think franchises are expensive. Well, guess what? It's expensive to start a business, period, regardless of whether it's a franchise or not. All things being equal to what a franchise system does, though, right? So, not if you're going to start your own business and you're not going to spend, $10,000 to $15,000 in advertising, you're just going to do word of mouth. Obviously, that's a savings expense. If you're not going to put your business in a high-end retail space, then obviously that's going to save on some rent. So this is an example of, hair care type of investment. But then I also wanted to point out a service type of business and investment and kind of what that ranges. So now you still have a franchise fee, right? That initial franchise fee that you have to pay to the franchise to secure the territory, to secure that you have the rights to utilize their trademark in their systems. But then you also have a little bit of maybe rent for, storage unit, storage space. You're not going to necessarily need those tenant improvements. So there's, savings on that end, but everything else it's going to take to get that business up and running. So when you think of, holy crap, does it really cost $81,000 to $141,000 to start a home cleaning service? Well, it does if it's the kind of franchise where you're not doing the cleaning, right? Like if you're going to start a business and you're going to, own your own cleaning business where you're out there doing the cleaning, it's maybe you, one other person, you don't have maybe some, a branded vehicle, maybe you don't have a website, you don't have a custom CRM, you're kind of doing it, off the cuff. You very well can start a business and grow it to be successfully. With a franchise, you're getting more upfront, which is why the investment is higher. So any questions on the investment there? I know some people are like, franchises are so expensive, but it's really because they have certain criteria that they require in order to get the business up off the ground.
Jenny, I'd like to say, though, this is so important. So many people come to us for loans that have not even considered some of these expenses. Oh, yeah. And they think, yeah, that's why. But when you talk them through, even when they're not franchises, These are the kinds of investments it takes, especially right now with the cost of tenant build out.
Yep.
It's huge, and they just don't get that. So I'm glad that you you point out all these things that are eligible to finance in your startup loan.
Yeah, most people haven't. They haven't thought through all these expenses, right? Like they just think, oh, I'm going to start something and I'll get it running, but there's a lot that goes into it. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, all right. On the working capital, is that working capital to run the business? In other words, if someone has left their job, that doesn't include household living and that sort of thing as well. Is that correct? That's just
right. That's a great
business
point here, right? Like you don't see if I was going to build in a manager salary or owner salary, right? That's different. So this is just more so to keep the lights on in the business and probably the overhead for payroll, things like that, for 3 months. It's not inclusive. Not built in here is an owner's salary. So that's always something to point out as well. And
Great.
Janet, that's probably things that you run across too.
Exactly. And the SBA, we like to see that the owner doesn't have to take a salary for the first maybe 6 months or so. Not to say the owner can't ever take one. However, they like to see post-closing liquidity that can cover their personal expenses and things as they start up, go through the construction period and get started for a few months. So typically, Brian, we don't include that in the working capital, the owner's salary.
And Mark, I saw you had your hand raised, but maybe Janet covered it. Not sure.
No, well, I just had a quick. We have to jump off and go to our loan committee, but I mean, the value you bring seems like just a huge amount of value that you could bring to someone looking to get in. Just so I can understand this, I think I heard you at the beginning. So, long story short, you're compensated through the transaction, almost like a real estate broker. When the transaction happens, the franchise or pays you. Is that
pays me a referral fee? Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how you're not flooded with business. I can't imagine if I was going to get into a franchise, I can't imagine now not going through these steps with a person like you, because it's such a wealth of knowledge that they can learn about themselves anyhow. And so I don't mean to be an infomercial for you, but I'm shocked that you don't charge like a consulting fee up front or something anyhow. So it's great value that you're adding, and the franchisor is taking on the burden, and they would pay. So they're paying the same amount regardless. It's not like they would go and
no, it's not inflated. Deal. Remember, franchises are federally regulated, so they have to disclose what they're paying to. So it's not an inflated thing. Awesome. The reason that franchise organizations work with folks like me is I'm now serving them up a great quality client, or candidate, right? Absolutely. On a silver platter. It's not a tire kicker. I've already vetted them. I know what the franchise organization is looking for. I know what the client is looking for. So yeah, I'm that kind of middleman matchmaker, if you will. And that's why they pay the referral fees that they pay.
Cool. Good stuff.
Thanks.
That's surprising. Somebody that actually understands what the value of a lead really is. What a concept.
Yeah. Well, they know that, working with us, that we're working with people, whether it's localized all over the country, whatever it might be. So we're part of their marketing program.
Yep.
So I know we're wrapping up because we only have a few minutes here, but just so you know, I already talked about my first 3 steps. My last 3 steps come on the other end of this, where I present them with options, and then I am a guide through their research process. So to help them make an informed decision. Sometimes I work with people to help them decide to walk away. I'm okay with that. I mean, I won't make any money from that transaction, right? But maybe they'll refer me later. I think all things, come back around. But I would not want to work with someone and feel as though they got pressured into doing something that they're not going to be happy with in the long run. So a lot of times my job is to help them figure out, hey, let's not do this. Let's maybe the timing's not right, or maybe this isn't the right one. Let's look at different ones, whatever that might be. So kind of the whole encompassed process is what I'm taking them through, all the way the front end education and research, all the way to the back end until they make a decision one way or another. And that's it. You know, my favorite thing about franchises, you are in business for yourself, but you're not by yourself. So I always like to remind people of that. And other than that, that's all I got.